In this module, we are going to learn endogenous growth, intellectual capital, role of learning, education, and research. In majority of the neoclassical growth models, technical change is considered as an exogenous factor. Though it is an important driver to growth, however, Kelder and Arrow propose the idea of technology having some endogenous component as well. Further, the Solow model, which is largely based on idea of a residual effect of technical change, and that in the long run, the economies move on, the stagnant growth path was challenged on several grounds. For example, its unrealistic results for exogenous technical progress, accounting for more than 70% of output growth, prediction of convergence among poor and rich economies in the long run, failure to explain widened growth disparities, and long-run imbalances in factor productivities, etc. These shortcomings lead to birth of endogenous growth theory, which has been formally developed since 1980 following the pivotal works by Romer in 1986 and then in 1990 and Lucas in 1988, and which has soon become the dominant framework for studying economic growth and development. One of the main reasons why economists have grown interested in endogenous growth is because of an empirical puzzle. The neoclassical model predicts that countries with low per capita income grow faster than those with high income, so that over time per capita incomes converge. But a broader set of data indicated that the rich countries may follow an ever increasing growth path, while the poor economies they move on at much slower pace, leading to divergence among these economies. It is also found that even the same type of technology and rate of investment may not lead to similar results across the economies. This has also been found even the same level of foreign direct investment may lead to different results in different economies with different human and physical capital. Thus, it is important to find some endogenous factors that determine the rate of growth of these economies.
After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the weaknesses of neoclassical growth models, know the meaning of endogenous growth, understand the impact of technological spillovers on aggregate production function of the economy, understand the role of human capital on economic growth of any economy, examine the limitations of the basic models of endogenous growth.
Let us begin our discussion with endogenous growth models. The endogenous growth models, in contrast to the exogenous growth models, believe that growth of the economy is more influenced by the internal process and the policies and structure, etc., than merely the external factors. Endogenous growth is long-run economic growth at a rate determined by forces that are internal to the economic system, that govern the opportunities and incentives to create technological knowledge. In the long run, the rate of economic growth, as measured by the growth rate of output per person, depends on the growth rate of total factor productivity, which is determined in turn by rate of technological progress. The neoclassical growth theory of Solow and Swan assumed the rate of technological progress to be determined by the scientific process that is separate from and independent of economic forces. Neoclassical theory thus implies that economists can take the long-run growth rate as given exogenously from outside the economic system. The endogenous growth theory challenges this neoclassical view by proposing channels through which the rate of technical progress and hence the long-run rate of economic growth can be influenced by economic factors. It starts from the observation that technological progress take place through innovations in the form of new products, processes, and markets, many of which are the result of economic activities. The firms may learn from experience how to produce more efficiently. A higher pace of economic activity can raise the pace of process innovation by giving firms more production experience. The spread of this knowledge and consequently the macroeconomic effects of any technical progress depend upon the spillover effects that again depend upon the level of human capital in the society. Here lies the important difference between the endogenous growth theories and the neoclassical growth theories, which take technical progress as the exogenous factor. In this context, we can discuss here the basic models of endogenous growth given by Romer and Lucas. Next, we will discuss Romer's model. This model challenges the basic assumption of neoclassical model of growth, which refers to applicability of diminishing returns in the long run. This model states that many economies have been able to exhibit increasing returns to scale even in the long run. This long-run increase in per capita income has been possible not due to the external factors but due to the endogenous technical changes. Any change in technology leads to positive effect on productivity of the factors whose combined effect may lead to increasing returns. Romer has discussed about the spillover effects of technical change. He states that a technical change, any innovation, new method of doing things do not remain with one individual only. He stresses that the physical part of any technology may be privately owned, but the knowledge part soon becomes a public good. Since production is a social phenomena, any new method used in production unit soon spreads to another unit, as under perfect markets, the factors are perfectly mobile and they carry their knowledge along with them. A highly productive factor in a production unit not only himself, herself, higher level of productivity, but also raises the level of productivity of his fellow beings in the production unit. Thus, any investment in new knowledge, research and development or human capital may have greater social returns as compared to its private returns. As a result, the national output would be increasing at an increasing rate and new unit of human capital investment will yield increasing rate of return. In this simple framework of Romer's model, we take a single sector Cobb-Douglas type production function, which has inherent assumptions of homogeneous sectors and the applicability of constant returns to scale. But in order to include the spillover effects of technology on aggregate production of the economy, it includes a separate variable of human capital.
Therefore, the production function in Romer's model can be read as y is equal to a k raised to power alpha L raised to power 1 minus alpha multiplied with k raised to power beta. Here, a is the efficiency parameter of the given level of technology. L stands for units of labor, K for units of capital, which is presented here both as the physical as well as human capital. Y is the level of output and alpha and beta are the output elasticities of respective variables. Previous equation can also be written as y is equal to a k raised to power alpha plus beta into L raised to power 1 minus alpha. At any point of time, the change in output would be possible only due to change in physical as well as human capital and units of labor along with the changes in factor productivity. dy upon dt is equal to the partial derivative of y with respect to k multiplied by the partial derivative of k with respect to t plus the partial derivative of y with respect to L multiplied by the partial derivative of L with respect to t. Differentiating first equation, this equation can be written as delta y upon y is equal to alpha plus beta multiplied with delta k upon k plus 1 minus alpha delta L upon L. In both output and capital stock grow at the same and constant rate, then delta y upon y is equal to delta k upon k is equal to g. And since the growth of labor force depends upon the growth of population, which grows at a natural rate determined exogenously. Delta L upon L is equal to N, where N is the natural growth rate of population. Equation delta Y upon Y is equal to alpha plus beta multiplied with delta K upon K plus 1 minus alpha delta L upon L can be written as G is equal to alpha plus beta into G plus 1 minus alpha into N, or G minus N is equal to beta into N divided by 1 minus alpha plus beta. Here G minus N shows the growth of per capita income. In absence of any spillover effects of technological change, the constant returns to scale will be applicable, and under such conditions, since beta is equal to 0. This will mean that G minus N will also be equal to 0, which indicates that in absence of spillover effects, the economy will not experience any growth in its per capita income, and hence the constant returns to scale will be applicable. However, in Romer's model, all the factors with capital stock, labor, and technology are assumed to be working together, whose productivities mutually influence each other. The value of beta will always be positive. Hence, if beta is greater than 0, the growth of per capita income will also be positive. Therefore, G minus N is greater than 0. This is possible only due to the spillover effects of the technology within as well as the across production units.
Although this model has provided an important breakthrough, yet its applicability to the developing economies is questionable because many of the assumptions of this model find little validity in developing economies. For example, the assumption of single sector economy may be unrealistic for the dual economies of the developing countries. Moreover, the developing countries largely face the problem of structural rigidities, which are hardly mentioned by Romer. The analysis of these rigidities is very important in the context of spillover effects of technology, research and development, or any type of knowledge across all production sectors of the economy. Due to these structural bottlenecks, many a times the developing economies are found not to be using the full capacity of their available capital, even though they fight with the problem of shortage of capital. Romer model is silent about all such factors in the context of developing economies, while these very factors actually lead to slower growth of per capita income in these economies, even though they are using the same technology as has been used by the developed economies. Romer's model is silent about the causes and effects of all such problems of the developing countries. Actually, the developing economies lack sufficient incentives to invest in physical as well as human capital. This has a great effect on supply of savings, capital formation, and hence on growth of income. Besides, during the transition phase, developing countries also undergo the process of reallocation of resources, which are not generally efficient ones, particularly during the initial phase of the transition. This inefficient allocation of resources at any point of time has medium as well as long-term effects upon the growth of income of the economy. But all these factors have been ignored by Romer's model. Hence, the developing economies find little guidance from this model. Moving on to Lucas' model. Lucas' model of growth emphasizes the importance of human capital in the growth of the economy. He states that it is the difference in attainment of the human capital that has led to worldwide economic disparities. Lucas states that the developed countries went through the process of industrial revolution long time back in the history of these economies. The incentive to earn more profits has led to invest in creation of knowledge so that the conditions of normal profits can be converted into the long run capacity to earn supernormal profits. However, this process was hardly understood by the developing economies. This is their misconception or the overindulgence in the idea of capital stock being the sole and most important determinant of economic growth that has led to wrong strategies, and hence they were not able to experience the same level of growth as experienced by the economies which have experienced the epochs of industrial revolution. These misconceptions or the little understanding of the importance of human capital has led to lower investments in human capital for a long time in these economies. Consequently, these economies have lagged much behind the developed economies, who are growing at a faster rate, leading to divergence across the poor and rich economies of the world. Actually, the physical capital and the human capital are not substitute to each other. They are rather essential complements of each other. Therefore, a greater investment in human capital also leads to greater productivity of physical capital. In this framework, Lucas' model emphasizes that the skilled workers and the new technology are inseparable from each other. In order to measure the effect of human capital accumulation on income, we can identify two separate components of total savings in an economy. These savings can be used for increase in physical capital stock, and or these savings can also be used by enhancing the level of human capital in the economy, which will lead to an increase in productivity of labor as well as capital in the future time period. To further elaborate the growth model given by Lucas, let us first look at the basic equation of this model. In this equation, output is considered to be the function of physical as well as the human capital stock.
Y is equal to k raised to power alpha, h raised to power 1 minus alpha. Here, H stands for human capital and K for physical capital. As discussed above, part of the savings are spent in accumulation of physical capital and its part is spent on accumulation of human capital. These two components of savings can be expressed in the following manner. Firstly, taking S as the part of savings being used for accumulation of physical capital, that is KT plus 1 minus KT is equal to SYT. Secondly, the proportion of savings spent on accumulation of human capital can be expressed as HT plus 1 minus HT is equal to Q into YT. Thus, SYT and QYT respectively show the total amount of resources spent on accumulation of physical and human capital. For self-sustained growth of the economy, Y, K and H should be growing at the same rate. The rate of economic growth actually depends upon the growth of investment in physical as well as human capital. Therefore, it is important to find the ratio of investment in human capital to that of physical capital. Growth of physical capital. The growth of physical capital can be derived from equation KT plus 1 minus KT is equal to SYT by putting the value of YT. The resultant equation can be written as KT plus 1 minus KT divided by KT is equal to S multiplied with KT raised to power alpha into HT raised to power 1 minus alpha to be divided with KT, which is equal to S HT upon KT raised to power 1 minus alpha. If we take HT upon KT is equal to R, this equation can be written as KT plus 1 minus KT divided by KT is equal to S into R raised to power 1 minus alpha. Growth of human capital. HT plus 1 minus HT divided by HT is equal to Q R raised to power minus alpha. Since in the long period, the growth of human capital as well as the physical capital are equal, therefore, SR raised to power 1 minus alpha is equal to QR raised to power minus alpha, or R is equal to Q divided by S. This R can be used as long-term growth rate, and since in the long period the growth of income, physical capital and human capital are the same, therefore yt plus 1 minus yt divided by yt is equal to SR raised to power 1 minus alpha is equal to QR minus alpha is equal to S raised to power alpha Q raised to power 1 minus alpha. Thus, the long-term growth of the economy depends upon the rate of physical capital formation as well as human capital formation. It is the human capital which compensates the fall in growth of output due to applicability of diminishing returns on physical capital. The human capital investment rather ensures increasing returns by its internal as well as external positive and output stimulating effects.
Let us discuss the internal effects of human capital. According to Lucas, the total time of a human being, particularly a worker, can be divided into two components: the time spent in production and the time spent in accumulation of human capital. If we denote the proportion of time spent as mu h, then the time spent in accumulation of human capital will be 1 minus mu h. In any economy, the size of the labor force as well as its productivity per hour significantly influences the level of output. Therefore, instead of having merely the size of the workforce, Lucas has put forth the idea of effective labor force, which is shown as a product of the size of the labor force and the time spent on producing goods and services for a given level of human capital.
Thus, the long-term growth of the economy depends upon the rate of physical capital formation as well as human capital formation. It is the human capital which compensates the fall in growth of output due to applicability of diminishing returns on physical capital. The human capital investment rather ensures increasing returns by its internal as well as external positive and output stimulating effects. NE, integral of mu h, nh and dh, where it ranges from 0 to infinity. Here, NH is the size of labor force and NE is the effective labor force. Thus, we can express production as function of physical capital stock and effective labor force, that is, Y is function of K and NE. The level of human capital would not have a macroeconomic impact upon the aggregate output of the economy, but will also have to accrue certain private benefits to the holders of the human capital as in competitive market economy. Wages are paid according to the marginal product of workers. Since the workers with high level of human capital are more productive, they would have higher earnings. Total wages in an economy for a given level of human capital can be calculated in this way. Total wages is equal to F dash K N E into H into mu H, where F dash K and NE show the marginal productivity of labor.
Now we will discuss the external effects of human capital. Increase in level of human capital formation in any economy undoubtedly increase the level of productivity of a single worker, but also have an overall effect upon the average productivity of the economy as a whole. Even a single worker with higher human capital in production unit has huge ripple effects in the production unit. Same is true for the economy as a whole. But in a perfectly competitive economy, it is generally assumed that human capital of an individual would not affect the average level of human capital. Yet, its opposite is not true, as average level of human capital in any economy determines the minimum target to be achieved by average workers to ensure their employability. Hence, human capital investments and its attainments by the private individuals are largely determined by the average level of human capital for the country as a whole. This is termed as external effect of human capital.
To know about the external effect of human capital, it is important to know about the average level of human capital, which can be calculated as HA is equal to integral of H into NH dH, and it ranges from 0 to infinity, to be divided with NH into DH, which again ranges from 0 to infinity, where HA is average level of human capital in a country. Now we can easily adjust our production function by incorporating internal as well as external effect of human capital. First of all, let us have production as function of capital and effective labor force. Q is equal to A k raised to power beta T Ne raised to power 1 minus beta T. Putting the value of Ne, we get Q is equal to A into Kt raised to power beta multiplied with mu T, Ht, Nt, and this product is to raised to power 1 minus beta. Incorporating the external effects of human capital or the average level of human capital for the society as a whole, Q is equal to A into Kt raised to power beta multiplied with mu T, Ht, Nt raised to power 1 minus beta multiplied with Hat raised to power T. Any increase in time for accumulation of human capital, that is 1 minus mu T, will raise the individuals as well as the average level of human capital of the society, which will have positive effects upon the level of output at an increasing rate. Thus, the economy would grow at a faster rate due to applicability of increasing returns to scale in the production sector. The change in human capital, which is the main force behind the faster growth of the economy, can be measured as Ht hat, which is equal to Hat raised to power T into G 1 minus mu T. Here, G is the growth of human capital and it is always positive. That is, G is greater than 0. But the existing level of human capital, or say the knowledge which the society has attained so far, will have diminishing returns to output. Therefore, T is less than 0. In order to simplify the analysis, if we simply assume T is equal to 0, then the equation showing the change in human capital at any point of time can be shown as Ht hat is equal to Hat multiplied with G and 1 minus mu T. We can discuss here two extreme cases. One is when whole of the time is spent in accumulation of human capital, that is mu T is equal to 0, and second, when whole of the time is spent in production only, that is 1 minus mu T is equal to 0. In the first case, the change in human capital will be Ht hat divided by Ht raised to power T, which is equal to G. That is, the economy can achieve the highest growth of human capital equal to G. While in the second case, there will be no change in growth of human capital and it would be 0.
In absence of any change in human capital, since diminishing returns to scale are applicable to the existing level of human capital, the economy will also grow at diminishing rate for any change in its inputs. But in real life, the value of mu t or that of 1 minus mu t varies between 0 and 1, which shows that the economy moves on a continuous growth path and the rate of growth of the economy will be higher for higher growth of human capital. This fact points towards the fact that the applicability of diminishing returns can be postponed by increasing investment in human capital. Thus, the economies with higher rate of growth of human capital experience a higher growth of income, and the economies with lower investment in human capital will experience the lower growth of income, leading to divergence between the two types of countries. Through this fact, Lucas pointed out that the gap between growth of rich and poor economies can be explained by the gap in investments in human capital in these economies. Finally, Lucas also differentiated between the optimum growth path and the equilibrium growth path. By optimal path, he means that society wants to maximize its utility function by achieving the optimal level of per capita income with an optimal combination of KT, NT, CT, HT, and HAT. On the other hand, equilibrium path means that there is a simultaneous equilibrium in all firms and households as well as the economy as a whole. Assuming that HAT is exogenously determined and it is expected that each individual will follow the same path so that the actual behavior coincides with the expected behavior and there is no gap between demand and supply, that is aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply for given physical and human capital stock. The solution will be achieved in both the cases if HT is equal to HAT. Any divergence between the two will mean that divergence from equilibrium as well as the optimal growth path. Like Romer's model, Lucas' model also gave little attention to the structural rigidities of the developing economies. There is no doubt that these economies have low level of productivity due to low level of human capital, but at the same time, these economies are also suffering from the problem of misallocation and misutilization of the available resources. These economies not only face the problem of skilled workers, but also underutilization of existing human capital. Due to lack of opportunities and low returns to human capital, there is little incentive to invest in human capital by the private individuals. On the other hand, the skilled workers have a greater tendency to migrate to other countries in search of better opportunities. These are the workers which the economy needs the most, and their emigration means the drain of most essential and the productive resources. This loss of intellectual capital has a huge and long-run adverse effect upon the economic growth of the poor countries. These aspects are actually ignored by Lucas' model of endogenous growth. Yet, there is no doubt that the developing economies can learn a lot from this model, that it is the higher level of human capital that can ensure higher productivity of other resources. So it must be attained as well as retained. Now let us summarize what we have learned from this module. The neoclassical growth theories, though recognized the importance of technology, but they took it as exogenous factor, and therefore they failed to explain why even in the long run the richer economies are growing at a rate higher than the poor economies, and why same level of investment and technology do not produce similar results across the economies. Moreover, there is little evidence of convergence between the two types of the economies as suggested by Solow's framework. The answer to many of these questions can be found in endogenous growth models, which state that the returns to capital and a given technology mainly depend upon the inherent characteristics of the economy, and therefore the factors to growth are endogenous rather than being exogenous. This is the spillover effect of the technology and the spread of human capital that leads to increasing returns to scale even in the long run. Higher is the speed of these spillovers, higher will be the rate of growth of the economy. Similarly, the economies which invest more in human capital are also able to grow at higher rate than the economies which spend less on the same. Yet these models have proposed one sector economy which finds little applicability in the developing economies which are dual in character and face the problem of structural rigidities. In developing economies, misallocation of resources is as big an issue as availability of the same. Though the endogenous growth models are the important breakthrough in the existing knowledge of growth economics, but they hardly deal with the important issues of the developing economies, which hinder the process of growth even with increase in investment in human capital as well as creation of technology.